All right, welcome back to another podcast interview episode. Today I am joined by Paul Bodnar. Did I say that right? Paul, welcome to Croc Chat. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, we're happy to have you here. Obviously, with a show like Croc Chat, most of what we're going to talk about is crocodilians. And I pick and choose people that I want to talk to that I've either known for a long time or recognized from the internet. Now, you're somebody I became familiar with first through social media. And we became friends on Facebook. This was our common interest, and now we finally get to talk. So this is our first time talking. But most interviews go with, let's start with an intro. Tell us your background. I'm going to reverse it for this one. And we'll start with the current, and then we'll work our way backwards to see how you got to where you are. Because one of the things I'm really excited to talk to you about is you bred Osteolaemus.
Several times. Yes, I own more dwarf crocodiles than probably anybody in the country and almost half of the zoo community. It exceeds almost 40 individuals.
Oh, wow.
And they're spread out throughout either zoo settings or strategically I've put them with friends, usually down in the southern states, but that can vary. And then I keep them as well in my facility. And I've been working with dwarf crocodiles since 1992. But yes, I hatched out babies this year. I've hatched out babies last year, and I hatched out babies the prior year.
That's incredible. So you're located in Ohio, correct?
That's correct.
And you have some there with you in the northern climate?
I keep them actually in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But yes, I keep them. Pennsylvania is only 2 hours from here, so I have a facility in Pennsylvania that I keep my crocodilians at.
And then when you say they're spread out, does that mean you're lending some to zoos or other breeders?
Yes, actually, my total count of crocodilians exceeds 70 as of this year. So it's quite a collection, and it started with one American alligator in 1992. And the alligator at the time was a little bit larger than I was able to handle. It was my very first crocodilian personally, although I had been at worked at the Cleveland Zoo for a total of 7 years in the rainforest. But I sold the alligator after having it for about a year. And I just happened to be lucky enough to acquire a baby Osteolaemus dwarf crocodile in 1994. And worked with that species either in zoo settings or personal settings. I had a mentor as a friend and a pen pal, and that was a fellow by the name of Dr. John Gabler, who started the Fort Rickey Zoo in Rome, New York. He was living in Eustis, Florida. He was a medical doctor. He was a surgeon. Although he had started the zoo in Rome, New York, he had sold the zoo and moved down to Eustis, Florida. He and I became pen pals through the organization. We met through NOAA, which was the Northern Ohio Association of Herpetologists. We had met on the phone. He called me once on the phone when I had actually had the advertisement for the alligator. And through a series of my relationship with him, that led to kind of really having dwarf crocodiles as my favorite crocodilian, and acquiring groups, pairs, So I've got them in South Carolina. I've got them in Pennsylvania. I've got them in Florida, and I've got them in about another 5 facilities throughout the country. Now, historically, I've had them in places like the San Diego Zoo. My offspring are currently at the Bronx Zoo, and I've had them in various places, both AZA, which is the American Association of, or the American Zoological Association, as well as the ZAA, which is the Zoological Association of America. Both facilities, I'm in the ZAA, and I've been a professional member and past credited for 15 years in the ZAA association. But as long as the person is competent with crocodilians and experienced, and they're typically a friend or somebody I know who has a good reputation, they have a good chance that if they contact me, I'll generally bring them in to breed. I'll send them a pair of dwarf crocs and ask them to say, hey, why don't you kind of come into the family? We'll work on breeding these. The pair that I keep at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, I have a female at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago that's paired with the Brookfield's male. And that's where I've been collecting the eggs at the zoo every year. They call me and they say, hey, your female laid 25, 26 eggs. And then I'll go ahead and I'll pick up those eggs and put them in the portable incubator in the backseat of a Lexus that has a crocodile tag as a license plate. And the portable incubator, over the years, I've refined the transport of moving those eggs at about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So the embryo has a chance to adhere to the wall of the egg internally. Move those to an incubator or a couple of incubators, and hatch them out successfully. And then it's wonderful. It's one of the highlights of the year is to hatch them out right by my hands. And if you want, I can go a little bit into how I've been able to get better at hatching eggs, moving them from state to state. Because I own the animals, I don't need a federal permit to move my own eggs between state lines. Now, in the past, I've had a captive bred wildlife permit that actually covered the entire order of Crocodilidae and all sorts of snakes and reptiles like Indian pythons and iguanas that were endangered species. About 5 years ago, they've stopped issuing the CBW permits pretty much across the board. But by that point, I had so many crocodiles, from Cuban crocs to saltwater crocs, Nile, West African Nile crocodiles, dwarf crocs, both species of dwarf crocodiles. There's 3 species. There's 2 in the United States. The dwarf caimans, the Morlet's crocodiles. So I've got I think it's nine species currently, broad-snouted caimans, both that I've bought under the permit or at some point have been donated. But the dwarf crocs are a bit of a challenge in the way that I incubate the eggs, is because I don't incubate them here and collect them right out of the nest. I have a zoo that lays the eggs. They lay the eggs at the zoo. I've learned through taking a online crocodile class from Dr. Sally Eisberg of the Crocodile Specialist Group. She's in Darwin, Australia. She does an online class about incubating crocodile eggs, and the class is a couple $100. It's a college credit, college level class, about 9.5 to 10 hours of theory, and then you've got to pass some certain tests, so you've been paying attention. But the transport of the eggs, the humidity, the temperature, the oxygen flow, all of those in the classwork give you parameters on incubating crocodile eggs specifically. So I've been able to follow those, and I've gotten very much better over the years at getting the babies to hatch.
So it was a little tricky in the beginning. It wasn't just incubate the eggs at the certain temperature and then success.
Correct. And we can go down all sorts of rabbit holes tonight. I help the University of Florida every year down in the northern Florida Keys and the Everglades. We hatch out wild American crocodiles. We don't hatch them out. We count them as they're hatching. So we're surveying nests, and a lot of times we go down at the right spot where they're literally coming right out of the egg as we're recording the data on the nests. So there's four major parameters, four main parameters to incubating crocodile eggs successfully. The first parameter is temperature, and we see that we want to have a certain temperature range, and there's a gradient where at certain temperatures there's a better success in the hatch rate. Mm-hmm. Crocodile eggs typically are incubated anywhere from about 84 degrees to about 91 degrees, 92 degrees. But there's a bandwidth where you'll produce males and females, and then intermediate, and then high temperature females. So there's a temperature range that you keep within, and I believe I've been doing 88 degrees, 87.5 to 88 degrees, depending on which incubator the eggs are in, because I do spread them out through 3 different incubators. The second, so you've got temperature, you've got a range of temperature, and there's certain temperatures that are the data shows that more eggs hatch out at these temperatures than the extremes in what would almost look like a curve, like a Poseidon distribution curve in statistics.
Yep.
The second is not necessarily humidity, although you could say it's humidity. Your humidity has to be above 90%, and anything below about 85% is apparently lethal. It's not enough humidity in the egg. But more specifically than humidity, it's actually surface moisture exposure. And this is what I've learned, that your humidity in eggs, you could have a high humidity, but the egg itself is not getting that surface moisture. And I use Spanish moss in captivity to allow that egg slightly damp Spanish moss along with coarse vermiculite to allow that egg to actually touch the surface of a slightly moist substrate. In the wild, in the studies we're doing with the American crocodiles, Florida has different types of soil. It has a clay-like soil. It has sand. It has some vegetation soil that these American crocodiles will lay their eggs in a couple of different types of soil down in the wild. And they find that some of them that are laid in like these clay types of soil don't get that surface moisture, even though technically that humidity is the same level as, say, a pit of sand. So there's a little bit of we're splitting hairs a little bit. You have the temperature, then you have the surface exposure to moisture in the egg, aka humidity, and then you have oxygen and airflow. And I started with where the class really says each egg needs, based off of saltwater crocodiles and alligator eggs, each egg needs 0.62 liters of airflow per egg. So when you're calculating how many eggs you're putting in trays, you don't want to overextend the amount of eggs in small trays. You need to have minimum 0.62 liters of oxygen, air flowing through each egg. And then the final aspect of incubating crocodile eggs is the lighting, but there hasn't been a lot of studies done with how light in an incubation chamber affects hatch rates. Does it speed up hatch rate? Does it have any effect? Does it have no effect? That aspect wasn't really studied very well. But in my purposes, the first year, I had one egg hatch, and the uh, time that the eggs are laid, I have the zoo hold the eggs in an incubation environment similar to mine for about 3 weeks because either very, very early on, within 24 or 48 hours, you have a window where the embryo is so tiny it hasn't attached itself to the inner lining of an egg. So you can move those eggs all around. You can take those eggs carefully and transport them. Now, anytime you uh, have a crocodile egg, you want to use a pencil to mark
Hmm.
the top of the egg inside the nest. It's extremely important because as you're pulling those eggs into your, uh, they call it an esky if you're in Australia, but we call them coolers here in the United States, or your box. Any rotation of that egg beyond 30 degrees is lethal to the embryo. So a 20 degree rotation for a short time, you're probably fine. But if you take that egg out and you don't have that very top of the egg marked, and you rotate that egg accidentally, you've destroyed, or you've generally killed the embryo through it kind of suffocates the egg, or the pressure of the yolk destroys the little embryo inside. So it's real important. We collect the eggs at the zoo, or the zoo collects the eggs. They mark them. They put them in an incubator. My friend is Dr. Chris Bodnar from he was at the Cleveland Zoo. He was the veterinarian at the Cleveland Zoo when I was back there in the 1990s. We did incubate 2 years of American crocodile eggs while I was in college. So I remember doing that on the weekends. We would have the eggs were hatching while I was at the rainforest. But he reached. I had posted last year on Facebook that I needed more incubators, and he reached out to me and he said, "Oh, Paul, I'm at the Franklin Zoo up in Boston." He had been at the Dallas Zoo after the Cleveland Zoo. Now he's at the Franklin Zoo, and he has these incubators from SeaWorld when SeaWorld was in Cleveland, Ohio. And they were in the early the 70s and the 80s, and they shut down. I think they shut down in the mid 80s or so, or late 80s. And he's got these giant Grumbach German incubators, and he said, they're basically built for birds. They have rotators in the incubator, and they incubate at a bit of a higher temperature than crocs go. They start at about 92 degrees and they go up to the 110, 115 degrees. But I bought these giant German incubators that were the incubators that they used for incubating birds at SeaWorld. A friend of mine's an electrician. We reconfigured all the electronics. We updated everything, and he updated everything internally. We refurbished these units, and that's what I'm now using to incubate the crocodile eggs in, because we were able to adjust the temperature. We were able to refurbish the electronics. Now I still have to have power converters because they run on a European current system, but it's wonderful. It's a little bit nostalgic. I've got the incubators from SeaWorld that are one is probably 150 pounds. The other is about 60, 70 pounds. They're analog. They're all analog dials. They have, I put in an airflow system to get a little more fresh air in the incubator chamber. So I've been incubating the croc eggs in these wonderful SeaWorld incubators. As the eggs are going to term, you can candle crocodile eggs quite easily, and it's a lot of fun. So early on, when I first get them from the Brookfield Zoo, my main goal is, and my wife and daughter are wonderful in that they'll drive and they'll come along. So we have a little bit of a mini weekend vacation. Go to the zoo. Friends of ours work at the Lincoln Park Zoo. We'll see them. Other friends work at the Shedd Aquarium and the museum. So one of the days we'll go to the museums or the other zoo. Sunday we'll go to the Brookfield Zoo, collect the eggs as fast as possible and carefully as possible. Get them in the car, drive them get them into the incubator, which takes about a 6 or 7 hour drive. And after they've been put in their substrate, the data is recorded. I'm very diligent on recording in a notebook all the parameters per eggs, times, temperatures. I'll take a little flashlight, a little LED flashlight, and you can put that little flashlight up to the eggs, and you can see if the eggs get these little red spider veins and banding on the egg, that you have a good egg. Now, some of the eggs will band, but there won't be any veins, or the vein growth just started and it'll have stopped. So I'm looking for eggs that have banded and are showing like a strong vein network under the shell. Those eggs are recorded. If the eggs are not good and they were infertile eggs, you'll put a candle, or you'll put a flashlight up to the egg while you're quote candling it, and that egg will glow a real bright yellow color. It's actually a wonderful color. It's like a General Electric bulb that you'd want to have in a vintage shop. It's this bright light lemon color, but that egg is not good. There's nothing inside it.
Just yolk.
Just yolk, yeah, just yolk. So over the course of usually about every 3 to 4 weeks in the early on, kind of let the eggs just be eggs and let them incubate. The temperature is generally, like I said, generally about 87 degrees, 87 and a half degrees, maybe 88 degrees, but I'm within that 1 degree range. And then I'll open up, or I have an assistant, either or, that will open up the eggs twice a day to get another set of airflow in the eggs, just for 30 seconds. And then you'll add water as necessary. There's a hygrometer in there. There's a thermometer in there. So I'm recording all of that throughout the first couple of weeks, along with whether I see veins or not. And then I kind of let the eggs alone till typically the eggs usually have been going about 90 days, plus or minus about 4 days on either side. So I've had eggs hatch about as early as 86 days, and some of the eggs have gone about 94 days. But as they get a little closer to the term, within that last 30 days, then I really start kind of hawking those eggs. I'm kind of hovering around those, candling them. I'm removing the yellow, if they're still yellow eggs or still undeveloped eggs, those are removed. So the gas exchanged, that those eggs have a little bit of a gases I don't want exchanged in with the good eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the good eggs that have a little baby inside, when you candle those, they don't pass any light through those eggs. You'll bring that candle right up, or you'll bring that flashlight right up to the egg. The egg will show like a porcelain color, but it'll be dark. There's no light that penetrates through the egg, and that's where it starts to get a lot of fun, because sometimes you can see a little hand will twitch in the egg, or there'll be a little triangular tail that will just move slightly, and you have a live baby African dwarf crocodile, an Osteolaemus tetraspis, in there. As the days are getting closer to that 90-day mark, it's both exhilarating and stressful at the same time. What the key indicator is that those eggs are about to hatch generally is that you will open up the incubator one of those days that's pretty close to that 90-day mark, and you'll hear a little chirp coming out of an egg. So you'll actually hear a little egg chirping to you. Chirp, chirp, chirp. It goes and dwarf crocs don't really shut up as little babies. Some species of crocodiles are kind of quiet. Dwarf crocodiles aren't as quite as vocal as alligators, which take the cake when it comes to vocalization. Siamese crocodiles are extremely vocal as babies. Morlets are fairly vocal. Dwarf crocodiles are almost as vocal as baby American alligators. Not quite as bad, but they're like 3/4 of the amount. So I'll generally hear an egg that will start chirping, and that will set off other eggs, or because the eggs are incubated slightly at different temperatures, some of the eggs are developed a little bit faster than the other siblings. When when that egg is open, when that egg is chirping, I typically will open it by hand for the reason that in the wild, a mother dwarf crocodile will lay eggs in uh, sand, and it'll have vegetation, it'll have dirt, but it'll be in a very acidic substrate. There'll be a lot of tannic acid in that nest, and throughout the incubation term in the wild, by the time that egg is ready to hatch, the acid has degraded the calcium on the outer surface of the egg quite a bit, so that egg is paper thin when it's ready to hatch in the wild. And that baby can take a little egg, the little egg tooth, and it'll move back and forth in the egg, and it'll scratch. And in the wild, they pop right out, usually without any issue. But in captivity, I'm using vermiculite and using Spanish moss and orchid moss, and my eggshells are pretty darn hard in captivity. It's not something where I've added the peat or anything like that to replicate a wild nest, not yet at least. So when that egg starts chirping, to avoid a little baby not being able to get out of an egg and dying in the egg, and that does happen. So you have to make a choice. You're at a crossroads. Do I open up that little egg? Will it be developed? Will the yolk have been absorbed? Or do I let that egg go a little longer and let it come out by itself? I've got some good friends that are really, really, really good at hatching up baby crocs, and they say, when it's chirping, open it up. So I'll start with my fingernails, and there's two membranes on a crocodile egg. There's an outer hard shell that's probably about in feeling that it's probably about 3 times harder than a chicken egg. So it's or thicker than a chicken egg. So it's a fairly hard shelled egg with a bit of a thick layer of calcium. So I'll use my fingernails to kind of chip away at that eggshell on the very top of the egg, and there'll be under that top layer, there'll be an inner leathery membrane that's akin to a snake egg, a softer, leathery, flexible membrane. I'll open up, or I'll chip away that top layer to the point where it would be maybe about 3/4, like three quarters or a couple of $half in size. So maybe a third of that top layer is removed with my hands manually. And then you'll see a little movement under that leathery membrane. And then sometimes within 20, 30 minutes, you'll see a little nose pop out. And when that happens, then I'm like a little kid in a candy store. I can't keep my hands off of them. I open up those little baby crocs, and baby crocodiles kind of burst out like fairly quickly out of an egg. They almost kind of spring out. Now, what I've done then is learned that, or understood that, once that first baby comes out, I'm going back every twice a day or 3 times a day to listen to the other eggs. But if I see that the other eggs haven't hatched in generally about 2 to 3 days after that first one is hatched, what I've started to do is I've started to take the eggs that I think have a baby inside of them, and I'll chip away at the outer membrane on those eggs and then leave them back. And then sometimes within about a day or 2 days, those eggs, I'll wake up the next morning and I'll see little noses sticking out of those eggs, or in some cases the eggs will actually have hatched overnight. There's some theories that when eggs are touching each other in the wild, see a crocodile will either, or a crocodilian will either lay they'll dig a pit, and they'll lay the eggs in a pit, and there'll be an air chamber between the eggs and the sand, and then they'll cover those eggs. Other species of crocodiles and alligators and caimans will dig a huge mound of vegetation, and they'll lay the eggs in this mound of vegetation. Same kind of concept. They'll have the eggs laid, and then they'll cover with a great big mound. But crocodilians are either going to lay their eggs in a sand pit, or they're going to build a mound. The American crocodile in Florida is the only exception in the world where they do both. Now, normally they'll always use the sand pit method, but they've recorded that there will be times where they'll actually build a mound nest, and they think that's due to genetic influx of crocodilians coming up from the Caribbean, and they've got a little bit of a population mixture of genetics, but basically outside of the American crocodile, which does both, you either get the mound or you get the pit. And when the eggs are touching each other, they create a synchronicity of hatching in the wild. So if the eggs are touching each other, they typically will synchronize the hatching, and all of the hatching happens at once, or within an hour, or within a couple hours of each other. In captivity, I don't have the eggs touching, and if I did have them touching, generally there's a high probability I would have been pulling out eggs because of it being infertile. So I'll start with 26 eggs, and by the time the clutch is ready to hatch, I may only hatch out a couple. So the eggs that I've been incubating artificially have not had the synchronization.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually hatching over a course of different days, and then they're also slightly different temperatures. So the baby is metabolizing a little bit differently in each egg.
That is a lot. We just had an entire lesson on the science of hatching crocodile eggs, which is, you said we'll go down rabbit holes. I don't consider that a rabbit hole. I sat here in awe the whole time and absorbing what you were telling me. But yeah, that was a lot of information. So for a second, I want to just back up. Some of our viewers might be new to crocodilians and not understand everything. A lot of people are familiar with birds, they're familiar with chickens. So we'll use the chicken egg as an example. I know a lot of people, at least here in New York, that will raise chickens for their own eggs. Incubating bird eggs requires a rocker. So when he mentioned the bird incubator from the old SeaWorld, they have built-in rockers, not quite like a hot dog turner at a baseball stadium, but they keep the egg moving, and a mother bird will rotate her eggs. Crocodilians and other reptiles attach at the top, and after a period of time, if you rotate that egg, the yolk will smother, the internal membranes will smother the embryo. So yeah, not letting them rock when you're transporting them, not rotating them in the incubator. But also the other thing you mentioned was different temperatures. Usually a chicken incubator, I've actually done it in my animal science class. We had all 21 eggs, I think it was, hatch. But maybe I had 21 because it's 21 days. And so it's amazing that reptiles take so much longer than a warm-blooded animal. But the other thing that was mentioned was the different temperatures. And crocodilians exhibit temperature-dependent sex determination. So is that the main reason for the different temperature? Are you trying to get different ratios?
Yes, that's correct. And I'm recording the temperatures. There's some pretty good there's a lot of really good information on American alligator temperature sex determination,
Mm-hmm.
saltwater crocodile sex determination, a variety of caimans. But when I started asking around about dwarf crocodile temperature sex determination, because species can be a little bit different on whether males are produced or females are produced. Certain species are a little bit different than others. I couldn't find a lot of information on what temperatures are correlating to whether you're getting males or females, or where you're getting the intermediate males and females. Believe it's an enzyme that's released that helps the temperature early on in the egg, depending on
Mm-hmm.
the metabolism of the egg. So I couldn't find much information on actual dwarf crocodile temperature sex determination. So I've been diligently recording, and my background is engineering, chemical engineering. I work in metal finishing. I did that degree, and I also did a zoology biology degree. So I had a little bit of a lot of time in school, and and it was generally a science, but I kind of had two two aspects of study in college. I was um, learning the zoology because I loved it, but I pursued a different avenue in life in outside of zoology, and I was always very fascinated with um, structures and parameters of how life works. How do you build a structure and then work within that structure? So so with these eggs, I've been very careful to document the different changes that each egg goes through with temperature guns, and with there's actually an app that I can use, that I can point my phone with a device that'll actually read the surface temperature of the egg. That's a part of my engineering job that I use for egg incubation, and then I also use air sparges and a little bit of water cooling systems to get that bird incubator temperature down a little bit, to incubate the crocodile eggs through my own engineering mind. And that's just more kind of tweaking it uh, and making it a little more personalized on how to do it. Yeah, I could always have bought a reptile incubator, but these German Grumbach incubators are a lot more fun, so to speak.
No, that's cool when you're able to mix that that type of science, the engineering, with what you want to do in the realm of biology with zoology. So it's you answered so many questions without me even needing to ask them, and it went in a direction that most interviews aren't going to go, as far as the developing of the egg. So I think that was great to hear about. What normally happens then with your hatchlings? I know you said that you
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah, they're too cute to get rid of them right away. So they I think they have a little bit of a bond to their keeper when they hatch. I'm not sure if I would say they imprint, but they certainly know over the course of a couple of weeks that you're going to feed them,
mm-hmm.
and so they get real excited when they see me, and they start chirping, and they start acting up by hissing at me when you know when I come in with a pair of hemostats or forceps, and I've got a pinky mouse or a dead frozen thawed piece of meat or pinky on the end of it. So so I raise them where they're fed here, they're taken care of here. I've got a facility that I keep them in that is a pretty large facility. It's private, and I could keep a lot of them indefinitely. And in some cases, with the dwarf crocs, I do keep those for quite a long time. Other crocodilians, like the Cuban crocs, we've got I've got those now in a breeding group down in Florida that we're about maybe 2 years away from breeding the Cuban crocs. But I keep my collection fairly, even though it's very large. When you come over and you see how many animals I've got to take care of, it's up there with some of the top best in terms of numbers and volume. But ultimately, it's a very decentralized collection. The adults are outside in natural sunlight. If they're a larger species, they're in many times they're in situations where the public can view them. So if they're at a park or they're at a zoo, there's people that are paying to go in like wild. I've got some at Wild Florida down in near Orlando, so people can go and see the animals. And then what I'll normally do with the park is I'll say, hey, look, you're taking care of these animals, you're feeding them, you're cleaning them. I realize that costs money. The animals are making money for you, hopefully, or at least they're keeping your park interesting. Let's just split the babies 50-50. So anything that hatches, you guys get to keep half, I'll keep the other half. So in terms of crocodiles, it's a large collection. And I get teased at work. My boss is an engineer, and I'm working with my wife is an engineer. They tease me that I'm on my exponential curve. I haven't necessarily gone parabolic yet, but I'm not far from that. If you really look at how populations can explode.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep a decentralized collection because now there are so many crocodilians. And I always encourage, unlike a lot of people that discourage people, you shouldn't have a crocodile as a pet, or I was raised in the environment when I was a young person. When I was a little kid, I was raised in the animal world. There were a lot of World War II vets that were still active. They were either managers at the zoo or they were at NOAA, and they weren't necessarily the baby boomer generation. They were the generation of more of the people that fought in World War II. And I took a lot and absorbed. Their thinking was generally you can get a crocodile as a pet, understand it, learn about the animal. You're going to make mistakes along the way, but if your heart is in it and you're dedicated to that species, you should be able to at least have one, even if you don't keep it for life. At least you should have the right to keep an animal.
Mm-hmm.
And not a lot of current thinking is like that. It's a lot more restrictive, but I give people the benefit of the doubt, and I think there's going to be a high mortality of crocodilians in the wild. A lot of times, 90% of them won't make it past the first 2 years of life. So even if I give somebody a crocodile that is experienced with reptiles, I still sometimes get a call and say, I don't know what I did. The animal died, and I says, well, okay, let's go through what happened. And sure enough, it might have been a common mistake is in the wintertime, people change the water of these animals, and they don't realize up north that water comes out pretty darn cold in your faucet. And you take an 86-degree water down to maybe 55-degree water, and that shocks the little baby and kills it because of the cold. I'm not one to get mad at that. I look at that as that's a rookie mistake, but it's a learning experience. And let's kind of do better next time.
That's forgiving. I'm going to give you a lot of credit there, because when you tell me somebody that you trust with experience in crocodilians doesn't think about a tropical species, I'll get away with that with an alligator, because alligators can handle that quick temperature change. They'll come out and bask in the sun in Florida when it's 70, 75 degrees and dive back into that 50-degree water. But every time I change my Moralettes water in the wintertime, I'll cart buckets if I have to because I can't get a hose to the hot water source, and then I'll double check to make sure it's not too hot nor too cold.
That's right.
So
That's right. And I've had animals out where, you know, the person's a PhD biologist, and I said, okay, I think you're ready for a croc, you know, and they're a high school teacher, or they're you know, they're a professional, and they've had a 10 years or 20 years of animal keeping, and says, all right, man, I'd really love to have a crocodile. We could do a little bit of outreach. My kids would love it. And I says, okay, you know, I said, I can handle if you come back and in 5 years from now and you say, I've got a 5-foot crocodile, I don't know what to do with it, it's too big. I've got resources where I can actually have that animal put somewhere, and that animal will have a really good life. So it's not, for me, it's not too big of a stretch to let someone raise a baby. And then when that baby gets 5 feet or 4 feet, I've got people in the zoo community begging for crocs, and they said we prefer something bigger, because if it's little, we don't want to have to deal with it. We'd rather have something that we can display right away.
right, not all that makes sense.
So it seems like the northern people really like them when they're little, and the southern people kind of really like them when they're big. And
But well, we're restricted in the north, and we can't keep them outside past
yeah,
maybe early October if we get lucky.
yeah, and then if you're in Texas or Florida or South Carolina, the babies don't do real well outside, because we'll have temperature shifts, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're not maybe as hardy if they get a cold snap. Whereas the little ones that are a little bit larger can accommodate that better, so more forgiving.
Exactly.
But I don't get angry. I just say, you know, that's part of the learning on these animals. And I've had early on when I was a kid, you know, I killed snakes. Sometimes it's as easy as not having a ground fault interrupter in your aquarium, and the light, you know, the light maybe shorts, and there's an electrocution situation. So okay, now you keep everything in ground fault interrupters. There's always learning to do with captive husbandry, and even though you may be pretty good at it, nobody's perfect. Although I had been a Zoological Association of America accredited facility, and then a member, and I say kudos to being involved in that organization, because what I did have to do was I had to get reaccredited every 5 years, and there's a heck of a lot of parameters that they look at. They do look at safety, they look at welfare, they look at diet and nutrition. So when I had mentioned earlier about having structure in the approach that you have with caring for animals, structure is very important, I think, to have guidelines, to have minimum standards, to have regulations of animal welfare. And I would say that when you look at how structure works in the human mind, if I'll take it down to a very easy, given your high school, given your background as a teacher, if you tell your students, go paint me a picture, you're going to get less quality in their work than if you were to say, okay, I want you to go paint me a picture of a rainforest with a waterfall and some wildlife. And you're going to get a better quality painting if you've given those students a little bit of structure to work in with, and you'll actually get more creativity in their work than simply saying, okay, go paint me something.
Right. No, it's 100% correct. Although nowadays, the way education's going, no matter what you tell them, they don't want to do any work. But that's a whole other story. It's interesting that you mentioned that you're okay with a couple of your babies possibly passing away. Understanding you made reference to the wild population, a very small percentage actually make it to adulthood. I think we're at a day and age where some people Maybe they'll watch this. I know it's hard to put stuff out there on social media when you lose an animal because everybody's judgy, but
Yeah.
they've gotten to the point where every animal's life is important. And I don't want to. It's hard to say this in the right way or not be taken in the wrong way. That yes, when I have an animal, its individual life is important to me.
Hmm.
But in nature, a true ecologist is worried about population size.
Right.
Animals are dying to disease. Animals are dying to predation. Animals are getting killed if they try to cross a road at the wrong time.
Right.
Droughts, extremes of heat and
Mhm.
rain. There's all kinds of dangers that 1 to 2% make it to adulthood.
Yeah.
And most people they want to rescue every individual that gets thrown off course. And I try to argue that yeah, you take that 4 foot alligator out of somebody's pool in Florida and you move it to the neighboring swamp and it's eaten by the 12-foot bull that lives there because that's his domain. And yeah, you gave him maybe one extra day.
Yeah. And I hatch a lot of animals. We're talking crocodiles tonight. I hatch out a lot of snakes. I hatch out lizards. Occasionally, I hatch out certain species of turtles. And even in hatching, even in clutches, say I'm going to use the example of maybe green tree pythons as an example. I'm going to switch from well, we could even stay with the crocs because you see this in crocs too. You hatch out a clutch of crocodiles, you're going to get some crocodiles that just don't take well to growth. They don't grow well. They eat all right, but for whatever reason, they just aren't growing like other siblings grow. And I see this in snakes, and you see this in clutches of animals. So if I were to buy a say a python or a crocodile, I always ask for the greediest little baby that eats as much or more than its siblings and dominates. And so even in the reptiles, you have different hardiness of spectrum of some animals are super hardy. They take off. They do well. They dominate almost if they were in a group setting. And other animals can be a little more subordinate. Their growth isn't optimal. Now you remember it's a spectrum, so you're going to get gradients. It's not one or the other, but you're going to see over time you're going to see differences in just a clutch of eggs that hatch. And part of that is Mother Nature. Mother Nature doesn't always bat 100%. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I hatched out uh, 30 ringed pythons last year. Ringed pythons are a beautiful orange and black snake from the Bismarck Islands, the Bismarck Archipelago, sort of near New Guinea, between New Guinea and Indonesia, up in that region. And as they get older, they lose their color of orange and they get this brown color. But out of the 30 that hatched, there was a couple that just sort of had these neurological problems, and we couldn't get these. They're not always easy to start feeding, so they do take a little bit of time to start eating pinky mice. And sure enough, we're like 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in, getting some of these slow starting snakes to take off, and then you realize that the snake has got a neurological twitch, and it's beyond nothing you did. You incubated those eggs. The eggs were right next to all the other eggs, but something went wrong in nature. And crocodiles are a really good example of that. They're not Each baby that hatches is not programmed or naturally going to make it in life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you do see differences in the fitness of individuals.
Well, that is true for any animal
Mhm.
population, and that's where natural selection
Yeah.
gets to select from. Mother Nature making the selection. So it almost makes you wonder if we aren't careful and we breed too many animals and some of those weaker specimens, which may not even appear as weaker specimens in captivity, because let's face it, genetic is not just variations, not just color and fast growth, but it could be behavior and how they're going to interact in their environment with each other and their ability to catch prey. And are we weakening a gene pool if we're not
Right.
careful?
Yeah.
That's another interesting take. You never know where a conversation is going to go. This is not exactly where I thought it would went, but I'm really glad it did, because we ended up talking about topics that don't always get brought up in some of the other conversations that I'm having on this channel. So that was amazing. As far as other reptiles, you do have a big collection if you're hatching out snakes as well.
Yes. Yes, it's a big collection. It's a very big collection. I have a employee that helps part-time, and it I'll go back to early on in life. The ability to naturally gravitate towards animals was there when I was a young, very, very young person. My parents said that in preschool I could catch butterflies with my hands, and in kindergarten I was able to quietly pick up birds and catch wild birds, like robins. I think it was robins.
Really?
So I had a very instinctive, almost natural gift of being connected to animals in a little bit of a special way. Kind of how some people are just very good at the violin, or they're very good artists, or they're very good at something specific outside the norm. I was very good with animals from an extremely early age, to the point where it goes farther back than I can remember, but my parents will fill in the gaps. That is nature. That was my natural inclination. And then I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and there was a organization called NOAA, which was the Northern Association of Herpetologists, Northern Ohio Association of Herpetologists. I was born in 1974, and my parents had joined NOAA. I was enrolled in NOAA as a member by 1980. So we're talking like 6 years old here.
Oh, wow.
And NOAA had monthly meetings down at the Rocky River Nature Center, and they'd fly in people from all over the world to talk about reptiles. And this is before the internet. This is 1980. These are slideshow projectors. These are people that are breeding, emerald tree boas or green tree pythons for the first time. These are people like Tom Crutchfield, who's traveling the world, and he's bringing in slideshows from his trip to Thailand on, the first time somebody saw a blue tree monitor or a green tree python that was a blue phase or an albino this, or Komodo dragons is first time. There's a lot of first time discoveries that people were getting together in a group of about 50 to 100 members at the meeting per month on a Wednesday night, and going from 6 o'clock to about 9:30 at night with a slideshow in a social environment. And I was a little kid. I was a real little kid. I was a pain in the neck to a lot of those people. But that was the environment. So it was a combination, and almost like I sometimes almost think it was like how a certain animal evolves on an island, and it grows to be a very unique species because it has the right animal that came to the island to seed it, and then it has the right parameters and no predators, and it becomes something of an anomaly. And I had both those in life. I had the parents that didn't crush the idea of having snakes and turtles and iguanas as a young child. And then I had the generation of mostly men from World War II that had discernment and judgment. And they'd say, all right, that you're not ready for a boa constrictor yet because you're in the third grade. We're going to start you with a corn snake. But you take care of that corn snake, and in a year or two, we'll talk about leveling up. That was all through grade school. Then that led to being asked to do speaking at the reptile clubs, and further then that led to speaking at Cub Scout and Boy Scout events, and being invited to bring your animals to the zoo as a private person back then, which created an experience of being able to speak in public and learning how to talk to people and engagement. And so all of these other side skills came on at a young age. At about the high school level, there was already I probably already had about 20 animals at the time. The zoo had a reptile fair that private individuals could bring from the NOAA. They could bring their reptiles on display at the zoo for a couple of weeks. And Chuck Vorchek was a senior education specialist. He was one of the co-founders of NOAA. Also, he was in Mensa. He says, Paul, we would like you to lead that and watch those animals and take care of these animals while this is happening. So you're kind of a volunteer, but you're in charge of making sure that the doors are open, the cages are clean. So that was another push, and that exposed to a greater variety of reptiles than what you had, because you had doctors bringing in their big-headed turtles from Madagascar. You had professors bringing in Massasauga rattlesnakes, Gila monsters, 16, 17-foot Burmese pythons that the zoo had that you could take out and hold. That was probably 150 to 200 animals, depending on the year, of all more exotic reptiles.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time high school ended and I was starting college, they said, would you like to take care of the animals part-time in the rainforest as a keeper? That exposed me to more of the crocodiles. We bred American crocodiles 2 of those years. So I was hatching out crocodiles instead of going to college parties on weekends. And I thought, man, I'm in this acre. The rainforest was, at the time in 1988, it was a $30 million building, 2 acres of rainforest and animals, Fiji island iguanas, American crocodiles, Komodo dragons, pit vipers, all of these really, really neat zoo animals that I took care of from 1993 to 1998, about 20 hours a week while I was going to Cleveland State University and pursuing. Originally, I started in the zoology, and then I capped it off with eventually getting 2 degrees, one in zoology and my engineering side of chemistry. So that experience really professionalized the way that I look at how to keep animals. And then it leads to trips to at the time we went to Venezuela doing field work there were 3 groups that the zoo and Cleveland State kind of combined. The students and the zoo people got together and they said, okay, we're going to go to the Caparo Forest Reserve and we're going to look at primate populations in one group. Other students are going to look at caiman and turtle populations. And then the third group will do bird migrations. And these were with the professors and then the zoo executives. So I think there was about 17 of us from Cleveland State, but it was handled by the Cleveland Zoo. And that's where exposure started to field work and learning how to not only keep animals in captivity, but by understanding how the biology and the ecology is in these environments, that you can link that to the captive animals that you keep. It helps give you a better understanding of a bigger picture. That was kind of the start. Now, since then, I've been to 30 countries around the world. and it's been some very incredible places. It's been New Guinea, studying Boland's pythons in the wild for a short stint. It's the Solomon Islands, looking at sea turtles. There's a place in the Solomon Islands called the Arnavant Islands where green, hawksbill, and leatherback sea turtles all congregate 365 days a year, and they use the same beaches to nest. It's been a lot of croc stuff. It's been field work in Australia with the freshwater crocodiles. They call them the Johnston's crocodile, as well as with Graham Webb, Dr. Graham Webb, who was the head of the crocodile specialist group. We would fly in a helicopter and go into this Malacca swamp and wild collect saltwater crocodile eggs, and then helicopter those out while you're in the wild with saltwater crocodiles all around you, and you're risking your life doing that. It can go on for quite a while, but it's been Africa, Asia. Now the only continent lacking is Antarctica. As you know, that eventually will go to Antarctica, just to say you went to Antarctica. But it's been 6 continents and 30 countries, and it doesn't. At 50 years old this year, it doesn't seem to be slowing down. If anything, there's still areas that I'm going to kind of cut off in life and focus on the core, on some of these core parts of the personality that are a little more centered.
Your personality.
Yeah. So I still play. Friday night I still play Dungeons and Dragons with high school friends. Or I said, and that's been going on for 4 years. This is this January that's going to end because I want to take an online graduate class and get into advance in another zoology class, that instead of goofing around, I could put that to going and taking, say, another science class or taking a series of classes over the next couple of years.
Listen, don't say just because you're turning 50 that you're not slowing down like 50 is old.
No,
I just turned 57 last week.
Oh, good for
and
you.
Other than my knees and shoulders,
yeah,
the mind can't stop. If I stop, I don't know what I'll do. I finally wrote a book. Figured out that I had enough to put into a book instead of just regurgitating stuff between my experiences. And I also do artwork. So I do a lot of drawing. I donate a lot to Rockfest for artwork. I got to design one of their T-shirts last summer for the Cuban and American crocodile in Tampa.
Oh wow!
And so now, like I said, when I retire from teaching, my passion has always been reptiles. And I've done a lot of work here in New York as far as building a reputation as the reptile guy, and people look at me as the local expert. Not too many people are allowed to have crocodilians anymore, or the venomous snakes that I used to have. I no longer have venomous. But now I want to move on to something bigger. See, I don't plan on retiring from teaching and just sitting in a rocking chair either.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like I look at it almost as a fractal pattern. That says this year I'd like to be a little more fractal in kind of in the direction. Now, what we didn't talk about tonight was, along with the crocodilians and the reptiles, I have a very, very equal interest in birdwing butterflies.
Oh, wow.
And that is the genus Ornithoptera, and then the genus Troides, and then the genus Trogonoptera. And these are butterflies. They typically come from the Indo-Australian, New Guinea region of the world. The females can be about the size of a dinner plate, and the males are extremely colorful. They call them birdwing butterflies because their flight actually resembles birds. It resembles small birds when people see them. Now, along with the reptiles, I pursue collecting these birdwings, and in cabinets and cases like you would see at a museum.
Mm-hmm.
They're very similar to when I'm a member of the Crocodile Specialist Group, the IUCN Crocodile Specialist Group, and one of their core mottos is sustainable use of wildlife. So crocodiles, as you know, are farmed, and meat and leather uh, goes to consumers, and that mitigates the pressure on the wild population. So it's actually a good thing to farm these animals. And similar to that, the bird wings are ranched and farmed, so they can farm these caterpillars and grow these butterflies. They euthanize them. They go to the collector market, but in doing so, a pair of butterflies is worth about 5 rainforest trees that don't get cut down. That's about the equalness of just one pair of butterflies, or one pair of butterflies is worth maybe 7 or 8 sacks of coffee. That in New Guinea they have kina as the currency. They might get 150 kina for a pair of butterflies and 15 kina per sacks of coffee.
Wow.
So they have a very similar structure of economics in butterfly collecting for these bird wings, as well as the crocodilians do. And we have a butterfly scientifically named. It's Ornithoptera creosis wallaceiform bodnari. It's the last name. But if you look up birdwing butterflies or Ornithoptera, you can see just how brightly colored these are. They're typically they were discovered in the Victorian era by Alfred Russel Wallace, or a fella named Meek, and Lord Rothschild would commission out of England. He would commission people to go find new species in these areas. So there's a lot of them are named after queens. There's Queen Victoria, there's Queen
Mm-hmm.
Alexandria, there's Lord Rothschild's birdwing, there's Raja Brooks birdwing. They were discovered in the late 1800s to early 1900s. They're very dimorphic, meaning the sexes are different. Females are very, very large. Typically, they're brown and cream colored. Males are gold, yellow, green, blue, and each male is more spectacular than the other one. Similar how birds of paradise are. So if you add that, the collection of birdwing butterflies, I've accumulated probably one of the largest collections in the world, numbering about 3,500 specimens. We collaborate with my friend is the retired entomologist from the London Natural History Museum, and there's another fella up in Quebec that we collaborate on a book. We're collaborating on a book right now, and then the fella from the museum and I. There's a particular bird wing that collecting is not an issue with populations and bird wings. What is the issue is typically mining or habitat destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, the Chinese and Asian companies can come in and deforest whole areas. And it's particularly on one island in the Moluccan Islands called Obi Island that it's due for an assessment to see how the mining and the deforestation has impacted a particular birdwing butterfly called Ornithoptera isaacus. Ornithoptera isaacus is a turquoise blue color. It's tremendously beautiful, but it's important to see how the wild population is doing. And then there are a couple of natives that live on the island that are ranching those birdwings, and that's been the saving grace because they're captive breeding them in a semi-wild environment. That would be something that we're looking into, and those birdwings can be put on another nearby island. That gives the population a secondary backup.
What is the commercial value of the butterfly or the caterpillars that makes them
Uh,
economically?
the cost of birdwing butterflies ranges. The very very inexpensive ones that are bred on the low end sell for about $25 a pair. Some of the rarer types sell for about $2,000 a pair.
And just for the beauty of them, that people are trying to reproduce them, keep them as pets, or I mean,
Well, the collector market is a little bit broader um, than other markets. It's there are some that are used, some for artwork.
mhm.
There are some that are used for collectors that are just a little bit eccentric, like myself, that just enjoy having the collection of the different island forms, similar to collecting stamps or collecting coins. But then they hold a scientific value, and there are museums that that do have those as well. So it's generally that's mostly the market for the butterflies. It's generally a collector market, an art market, and to some degree museums will display those, or they'll have exhibits. Now, um, the museums that I know that keep bird wings, typically it's fun is because there'll be a lifelong collector like myself that might have hundreds of them or thousands of them, and then when I die, my daughter doesn't want them, or I don't have a home for them, or I'm not going to now. Value on these things is about $1.5 million. Uh, there may not be somebody that I can find a home for them, so I'll just donate them to a museum, and that's usually how the museums acquire them. But in some cases, museums will buy them outright.
So it's similar to crocodiles and their skin in that it's like you said, sustainable use earlier, but conservation through commercialization.
Hmm.
Convincing certain areas that their wildlife is worth saving once you show them how they can put another economic value on it.
Yeah, and the way that insects typically work, most of the discoveries in butterflies are by collectors, that they're amateur naturalists. They'll study the population. There are some professional, they call them lepidopterists or
Hmm.
entomologists, but a lot of the butterflies, collecting is not a threat is not a threat to the population, because exponential reproduction in insects happens. So a butterfly female can lay 40 to 100 eggs, and those caterpillars grow up, and those can lay 40 to 100 eggs. And instead of saying that happens over the course of 5 years, butterfly life cycle is typically less than the whole cycle is generally less than 6 months to a year. Butterflies typically live about 2 weeks on average, with certain species living up to maybe 6 months if they feed on pollen. But the average butterfly, you count the lifespan in a number of weeks versus months or years. So the collectors, when you really look at the um, situation with butterfly collecting, collectors, if the population's 10,000 specimens on an island, or 20,000 specimens on an island, collectors are usually at most collecting maybe 100.
Hmm. Yeah, that's you wouldn't think that reptiles and butterflies would make an interesting combination, but it actually brought back a story in my mind. I like insects. I don't necessarily know if it's butterflies. My favorite are cockroaches, just because they gross everybody else out.
Uh-huh.
But when I was in grad school, my professor and my thesis mentor, his name was Dr. Heinz Meng. He was a butterfly collector, and he told his story that when he was a young boy, he ran over a sand dune at a beach. I think it was down in Maryland, and he saw a peregrine falcon on a bird. And he ended up catching that falcon, and that led to a lifelong love of falconry. And in addition to his entomology, he became an ornithologist, studied at Cornell,
Oh,
taught
wow.
at my college in SUNY New Paltz. So I was lucky that I actually had a world-renowned ornithologist, that
Yeah.
he the first scientist to breed peregrine falcons in
No
captivity
kidding.
and help bring them back to the Schwangunks in our Catskill Mountains here in New York.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. It's always fascinating how the spark of energy moves between people
Hmm.
in the animal world or in nature. And it's, you never know where you've gotten the spark from somebody, or enhanced your journey from somebody else. And it could have been somebody that decided to write a book, and you zeroed in on one chapter of the book or a couple of photos of the book, and that led your imagination. But it very much is a journey.
Oh yeah.
And we're always learning. There's just a couple of years ago, I discovered the life of Alfred Russel Wallace. So Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace, two pillars of biology. Most people are familiar with Darwin. You read The Origin of Species. You read The Voyage of the Beagle in college. That's a first year biology student
Hmm.
has to read those. And you learn a lot about Darwin. Of course, Darwin gets a little dry because he gets so far into it and so long. But Darwin is, most people think of when you're a graduating biology student. However, Wallace was a beetle collector. He was self-taught. He wasn't wealthy like Charles Darwin was, but he was a genius in so many ways. He's written over 20 books, and he co-theoried the evolution theory. Actually, he technically came up with it first, but Charles Darwin's friends in the Linnaean Society had Darwin published first by
Hmm.
alphabetical name. However, Wallace was incredibly intelligent, and I went through reading his books right after the time of COVID, and couldn't absorb enough of the Victorian writing and how insightful he was in his observations in Terranade and the Moluccan Islands and New Guinea, and how he just formulated these ideas out of scratch, or out of just his mind putting together
Hmm.
these pieces of the puzzle. So it's a tremendous privilege to Mark to talk to folks like yourself. I'm sure one day we'll meet. We'll have lot to talk about, and it's a tremendous privilege to find the people in these environments, to network, to socialize, to communicate, to then to be able to explore the natural world, to get the science. But at the end of all of that, it still is fun. It still is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Well, I am going to say thank you very much. You shared a lot of information with us tonight. It's a lot to absorb. Like I said, I'm going to edit this, so I'm going to put pictures of everything in there. It's interesting too that I'm thinking of what to put in there. I just saw you have a YouTube channel too.
Yes, you could type in Paul L. Bodnar, or you could type in Paul Bodnar Crocodile.
Mhm.
The YouTube channel is very, very, very amateur, because a lot of times I'm not editing. I'm just taking 30,
That's
30
the
minutes
best,
to,
all raw.
yeah. But yeah, there is a YouTube channel you're welcome to. And then the Facebook medium has thousands of photos throughout the decades of travel, and you can really go down. I'd say recommend on a larger computer, because you can go down years and years and years, and all the different countries and the travels and
Nice.
experiences are on Facebook has typically been the main platform for photographs.
Perfect. No, I saw the video of you helping one of those little hatchlings,
Yeah,
like
they're
you were pointing out at the very beginning of our talk, and hearing it chirping in your hand.
sure.
I was watching that video next to one of my smaller alligator enclosures, and I make that noise when I feed them.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people love to teach them to come to names or other ways to show their intelligence,
Yeah.
but I've always used the chirping. I've actually learned that years ago at Clyde Peelings back in the 90s.
Hmm.
But by using that, my gators will call back
Yeah.
like they're begging for food. So this little guy hears your crocodile chirping on the video, and he thinks I'm bringing food, and he's crawling over to my desk looking for something to eat.
Yeah,
So,
that video's up. There's those videos are uploaded to YouTube,
mhm.
and absolutely you can. There's I've got about 80 subscribers. So there's birdwing photos, there's Solomon Island photo or videos rather. There's the dwarf croc videos, and there's some other short videos of tigers and all sorts of really interesting things.
Well, I don't know if I have the account to download other people's videos, but I'll at least get some screenshots and share that stuff out there while we're talking in the background. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It was an amazing amount of information that you shared, and I really appreciate it. But when I sign off, don't go anywhere. I want to talk to you for just a few more minutes after we turn off the camera.
It's been a pleasure, Mark.
All right. Thank you.